Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into a fascinating story that takes what we think we know about military secrets and completely flips it upside down. For decades, our imaginations have run wild with theories about hidden bases and classified government ops. But when we actually look at the historical data, the real story hiding right in our own backyards is far more compelling and honestly far more concerning than any sci-fi movie. We all know the pop culture mythology surrounding these abandoned bases, right? We immediately picture deserted desert runways, guys in black suits, whisperings of extraterrestrial encounters. But the actual truth of what went down at these sites is way more grounded, shocking, and deeply human. Today, we're using historical and environmental records to cut through the folklore and get straight to the facts.
Now, the government absolutely covered things up. There's literally no denying that. But instead of hiding aliens, they were actually hiding advanced surveillance tech and, inadvertently, a massive, devastating environmental legacy. So the true cost of the Cold War wasn't some alien invasion, it was a highly toxic footprint left right here on Earth.
Part 1. Secrets, UFOs, and spies. Let's start with the ultimate myth. Area 51 and those enduring rumors of a Roswell UFO crash. What's really wild about this is how academic investigations, like those from the Journal of Strategic Security, unmasked the actual deception. The government actively encouraged the public to believe in UFOs. Why? Well, because getting people talking about flying saucers was the absolute perfect smokescreen to keep everyone, especially the Soviet Union, away from the real intelligence operations. So those UFOs? Yeah, they were actually sightings of the CIA's Oxcart aircraft. This was an incredible titanium plane that flew at an astonishing 90,000 feet. When commercial pilots flying way down at a standard 30,000 feet saw the setting twilight sun reflecting off the Oxcart's belly, they genuinely thought they were seeing a UFO. The FBI would then rush to meet those pilots at the next airport and practically force them to sign national security non-disclosure agreements. So, top secret human engineering? Absolutely. Alien technology? Not so much.
Part 2. America's abandoned defense sites. Zooming out from Nevada, that whole Cold War paranoia led to a massive, sprawling network of secret installations all over the place.
From radar stations hidden deep in the Vermont woods, to Nike missile silos just outside LA, down to the sweltering Everglades in Florida, and all the way over to Hart Island in New York. These rusted-out bases are just eerie reminders of the past. Sites like LA-88 were heavily guarded by sentry dogs, built as a last-ditch defense against a nuclear threat that thankfully never happened. But once the Cold War ended, a lot of these places were just abandoned and left to rot.
Bureaucracy being what it is, the government actually categorizes these crumbling relics under a very specific acronym, FUDS, formerly used defense sites. It's a pretty sterile term for what is actually a colossal environmental undertaking by the EPA and the Department of Defense to clean up Cold War contamination.
Just think about this number for a second. The military has reviewed over 9,800 of these sites across the U.S. and its territories for contamination. That's nearly 10,000 locations where weapons were tested, vehicles were serviced, and toxic chemicals were dumped directly into the environment. It's mind-boggling. And to clean up the roughly 2,700 properties that were actually deemed hazardous, that comes with an estimated price tag of up to $18 billion. The sheer financial and logistical weight of this cleanup is just staggering. Part 3. The Illusion of Fort Ord. Let's head over to California's Central Coast to see how all of this builds into a very real tragedy at one specific installation. For nearly 80 years, recruits reporting to Fort Ord thought they hit the jackpot. I mean, on the surface, you're stationed right on the pristine beaches of Monterey Bay. But the day-to-day dirty work of soldiering created a highly toxic underside. Troops were throwing live grenades into Mortar Alley, routinely pouring toxins down drains, and spraying soapy chemicals on massive open-air burn pits of scrap metal. If you look at Fort Ord's timeline, it's a rapid, startling transition. It started as an artillery field back in 1917, grew into the bustling home of the 7th Infantry Division. But by 1990, it was officially added to the EPA's list of the most polluted places in the entire nation, a literal Superfund site. It closed 4 years later. Today, parts of it make up a beautiful national monument, but that grueling environmental cleanup is going to take decades. Part 4. A Deadly Toxic Legacy. Right beneath that postcard-perfect surface at Fort Ord lurked an invisible danger that would haunt veterans for years.
The hazards left behind are a literal chemical nightmare. We're talking toluene, xylene, jet fuel, unexploded ordnance. Mechanics used to routinely pour 55-gallon drums of these intense solvents right down the drains, or they'd atomize them into the air from high-pressure hoses while washing planes. Every single Friday, crews would dump flammable liquids onto old aircraft parts, light them on fire, and douse the toxic sludge with foam. But perhaps the absolute worst offender was trichloroethylene, or TCE. The military loved this stuff. They called it a miracle degreaser and used it by the ton. The problem? When it rained, that TCE seeped straight through the sandy soil and right into the aquifers supplying the base's drinking water. Today, medical science firmly classifies TCE as a known human carcinogen, strongly linked to kidney cancers and rare blood disorders.
Part 5. The Fight for Accountability. We aren't just talking about abstract chemicals on a dry EPA report here. These toxins took a devastating human toll.
Fort Ord veteran Julie Akey really hits the nail on the head here. She said, if you've been given cancer, that's a life sentence. Julie was an Army translator who arrived there in 1996. She lived on base, drank from the tap, even watered her vegetable garden with the base water. Years later, with zero family history of the disease, she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a super rare blood cancer, at just 46 years old.
Stunned by this, Julie started looking for answers. She literally created a database to map out other sick Fort Ord veterans, and it blew up. Today, it tracks nearly 500 people, with roughly 200 of them suffering specifically from rare blood cancers. They come from all walks of life, but they share one terrifying common denominator. They lived or worked at Fort Ord.
And the real heartbreak? People saw this coming. Over 2 decades ago, a former airplane mechanic named Kurt Gandy gave this chilling warning during a community meeting about the cleanup. He said, if we do it wrong, they're going to know, because in about 20 years, people are going to start dying. Tragically, he was right. Almost a third of his former 1986 airfield crew are dead today, many from cancers in their 50s. Yet despite all this mounting evidence, veterans are still fighting tooth and nail for accountability. The VA frequently denies disability claims for these specific illnesses, pointing back to an outdated 1996 health assessment by the CDC that claimed there were no likely risks from the water at Fort Ord. Science has clearly moved on and understands the dangers of TCE now, but the bureaucratic process just hasn't caught up to the reality of what these veterans are suffering through. So the toxic legacy of America's military isn't some Hollywood sci-fi script, it's a harsh reality buried right under our feet. From the rusted radar stations in the Northeast to the polluted aquifers in California, it really leaves you wondering, with nearly 10,000 of these sites scattered across the nation, just how close to home do these secrets actually lie? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning what's beneath the surface.